Unique New York. Unique New York. Hey everybody, it's me, Simon, again, coming to you this time from slightly further away from the mic. So, hopefully the audio won't sound as tinny this time, and you won't be able to hear me folding my arms. Here, I'll do it right now. Did you hear that? Hopefully not. If you didn't, that means I adjusted accordingly. Anyway, we're jumping right into episode 2 here. I'm going to start with a few unrelated topics to the podcast. I was in the grocery store the other day and just browsing around for stuff. I noticed I don't know if you guys have seen these on display at all. The Selena Gomez Oreos. You know, me being a recovering fat ass and all, Oreos still are one of my main temptations. Having, looked at them, the box or the packaging just says Selena Gomez Oreos, and then in the smallest print, it says what flavor it actually is. Normal Oreo packets have pretty clear, like at least the different flavored ones. They'll say pretty clearly, mint chocolate chip or whatever it is, or peanut butter. Those are my weakness. But my point being, just by glancing at the packaging, one would believe that these are Selena Gomez flavored Oreos. I'll leave it up to your imagination as to whether or not I would eat that said product. Something else I wanted to address, we lost a legend yesterday as of recording this. Rest in power, Ozzy Osbourne. Obviously, legendary rock singer, basically started heavy metal music through Black Sabbath, and I blasted War Pigs in his honor when I found out the news, because that's one of the most unfortunately timeless songs of all time. One of the best anti-war songs ever written as well. I didn't ever delve too deep into Black Sabbath's discography or his discography as a solo act, but it happened, just a few weeks removed from his final concert, which, brought out a bunch of other famous rock and metal musicians to do covers of his songs. And, given the fact that he died not long after that, I haven't seen an official cause of death, but, the people around him must have known something, like, the time's ticking. We want to send him out on a high note. We want to, have people remember him as the legendary performer that he was, and I think mission accomplished on that front. Very poetic ending, especially because when he came out and performed, he was in that throne, since I guess he couldn't stand on his own, but it was, following the Prince of Darkness motif that he was known for, and is a good way to go about it. R.I.P. Ozzy, absolute legend. The world is gonna miss you. And another story, last one before we get into the sports and film podcast that you may or may not have clicked on this for. I wanted to talk about the suspicious canceling of Stephen Colbert's show by CBS, or more specifically their parent company, Paramount. It just so happened that Stephen Colbert's show is canceled as the parent company is trying to transfer a sale that needs to be approved by federal officials. And, I don't know if you're aware of the current administration, but they don't really take too kindly to criticism, and, they were in a position where they could have silenced a well-known critic of theirs, more specifically of Donald Trump's. But, to steelman the argument, what did they say that the reason for canceling the show was? This is one of CBS's legacy programs, so there must have been some kind of excuse for it, right? And the excuse was that it was a financial decision. Okay, well, let's look into the numbers then. Oh, it turns out that out of the 3 major network late-night talk shows between him and the 2 Jimmys, Stephen Colbert had the highest ratings by a somewhat significant margin. And this also happened just after Stephen Colbert had publicly lambasted Paramount for settling with Donald Trump in a lawsuit that they themselves had said was completely without merit. And this is coming from me, someone who hasn't watched a second of Stephen Colbert in the last 10 years before this story came out. It's just mega suspicious, to say the least. And the flip side of this is that guess what other talk show the parent company owns? The Daily Show with Jon Stewart. If you thought Stephen Colbert was a critic of Trump, I mean, Jon Stewart's the only good talk show host, and he's even more ruthless against the guy, so don't be surprised if he gets canceled as well. Speaking of canceled, this was a common conservative talking point, this cancel culture thing. So, yeah, given what we know, free speech warriors, where are you at on this one? Gee, it almost seems like you don't actually care about free speech. You only care about what you want to say, and the fact that you don't defend people's right to say what they want, even if you don't agree with it, means that you don't believe in free speech at all. But I would never accuse right-wingers of holding that much of a blatantly hypocritical position. I would never say that. This is just hypothetical, in this hypothetical scenario where there's no pushback from the right at all over this. But enough about the hell world that we're currently living in. Let me try and distract you and myself from that by jumping into the sports section now. JV needs to hang it up. Me being a Tigers fan and growing up in the era that Justin Verlander was really dominant in the late 2000s to early 2010s, yeah, I have a special connection to the guy, and I love seeing him playing still. I wanted him to, keep going as long as he could to maybe get to 300 career wins, possibly, or very likely, if he were to achieve that, he would be the last guy to ever do it, because, situational pitching is becoming more and more important as the years go on, and pitching wins just don't really matter that much anymore in the grand scheme of things. Not saying that it's not a thing that pitchers care about, or something that can help boost your confidence or something like that, but at least in terms of things like Cy Young voting, everybody with a IQ above 75 realized that win-loss record is a irrelevant stat when 2018 Jacob deGrom happened, when he finished the season with a 10-8 record and a 1.7 ERA. Which of those numbers do you think is more important to indicate how good of a pitcher Jacob deGrom was that season? But I'm getting sidetracked now. My main point is that Verlander's with the Giants now, and over the last year and a half or so, since the 2024 season, that is, he's been struggling, and it would very much be logical to assume that it's because of his age, because last year in 17 starts with the Astros, he had a 5.4 ERA and was left off the postseason roster because he was really on the struggle bus. maybe he could recover in San Francisco. No, he's at a tick below a 5 ERA now with the Giants in 16 starts, I believe. And his FIP is even worse. So even having a 5 ERA, which is not good, is outperforming what his numbers are expected to be according to the advanced metrics. He also doesn't have a win in damn near August now, which indicates to me like he's on a team that's somewhat in the wild card hunt. Like, JV, you might need to just hang the cleats up for your legacy's sake here. I know you wanted to try and get to 300 wins, but you're still like 40 away, and you don't have one yet this season. What, he would be 43 next season? I don't think you're gonna find some sort of resurgence at that age, so, like, it would really suck if he just went out with a whimper like this. I hope he can find form. That's what I want to happen. But I have my doubts. Serious doubts. Speaking of being on the struggle bus, yeah, the Tigers definitely fit that mold right now. I'm recording this just after they lost their third straight game to the Pirates, 6-1. They've now lost 8 of their last 9 games, including just getting convincingly swept by the Pirates and doing the unthinkable in the process, getting Paul Skeens a win. So what could be behind this sudden slump, this sudden offensive power outage that happened right after the All-Star break? I think exactly that. The All-Star break came at a pretty bad time for this team because right before the All-Star break, they got swept by the Mariners, who were white hot. I think they just happened to run into the Mariners at the worst time they could have, because everybody was tearing the cover off the ball for them, even against Skubal. But in that series, the Tigers didn't do bad offensively. Then they just came into the All-Star break on a somewhat bad note. The star players didn't have a good showing in the All-Star game, like I covered in my last podcast episode. And then they start out this road trip in Texas. Bats look completely flat. The only win they got in that series was 2-1, and Skubal was on the mound, so he kind of saved their asses. And then after that, they lose against Paul Skeens, which, you know, it's a tall task to come out on the victory side against Paul Skeens, but after that, the last 2 games they've played, they've just looked like not themselves. They just yesterday they lost, what was it, 8-5, and they had a couple of uncharacteristic mental mistakes where Torque didn't hustle after a ball that got away from him on an attempted pick at first, and O'Neal Cruz motored home and scored on a ball that he definitely shouldn't have. Torque did have a good day at the plate there, but then Wenzel Perez, he was coming home on a sac fly and slid in head first, but completely missed the plate on a head first slide. He just didn't extend his arm as he was trying to slide away from the catcher. He very clearly would have made it in, and the umpire even called him safe initially, but on replay review it was obvious he didn't touch the plate, so he was out. So that's a difference. That's a 2-run differential in that game, or a +2 run differential, excuse me. So going into the bottom of the 9th, it could have been 7-6 instead of 8-5 like it was, and if that's the case, who knows what happens. We're talking hypotheticals at that point, but not a very good mental game there. And then today, when they lost 6-1, the Bats, they just looked completely stuck in between in their approach at the plate. I was calling out Bailey Falter was pitching for the Pirates, and it's not like he wasn't giving them pitches to hit. I made a note that in the 5th inning, he had hung at least 3 first pitch curveballs that if they were anticipating, that those are begging to get hit. Those are meatballs. And then the very next inning, he did the same thing, hung a first pitch curveball to Gleyber Torres, and I yelled out, like, why are you not seeing this? Plenty of first pitch meatballs that were there for the taking, and they didn't swing at any of them that I could recall, at least. There was also a first pitch fastball right down the middle to Javi Baez, which I was very surprised that he took. He's a very aggressive hitter. He's cut down his chase rate a little bit this year, but he's still the same hitter at his core. He is a very free swinger, so that was shocking to see. So yeah, at least 5 meatball first pitches that they did not swing at, and I don't know why. So I hope that they can get back on the horse when they come home now for a extended homestand, but the thing is, they're running into the Blue Jays and the Diamondbacks, which are, right now, the Blue Jays are one of the hottest teams in baseball, and the D-backs are in desperation mode to win a few games to avoid being sellers at the trade deadline, showing that they can compete for a playoff spot, which they more than likely can. But yeah, it's not looking that promising for a team that's really on the struggle bus right now for the first time in this entire season to run into these 2 teams right now. It's not the best opponents you could face to get out of an extended slump. But again, why are they in this extended slump? I also think a potential reason is that they got out to that huge lead in the division before the All-Star break, and now that we're getting into the dog days of summer and they're just so far ahead of everybody in the division, they've lost a little bit of that underdog mentality that fueled that miracle run to the playoffs last year, and the fact that they were still overlooked a little bit going into the season. People weren't sure that they could replicate that success, and they proved that they could throughout the first 3 months of the year. And now that people are clued into the fact that this is a good team, that competitive fire might have gotten diminished just a little bit. Not saying that these guys aren't still obviously wanting to win and extend their division lead, but that I know, based on when I played, baseball is a mental game, and once you're coming down from a really, really good hot streak, like when I was a junior, I got off to an absolute heater to start the season at the plate, and then I came back down to earth because I just could not stop popping the ball up, and I started pressing, trying to overcorrect, and I think that might be what's happening to the Tigers right now. They've run into some bad luck and some unforced errors, and they're trying to press a little bit. Maybe I'm wrong. I want you to prove me wrong. As far as I'm concerned about the team, on a scale of 1 to 10, going into the All-Star break or just after the All-Star break, it was probably about 2 or 3, because every team goes through bad stretches, but this is a pretty extended one for a team that had the best record in baseball at the break. So now it's more like a 6. Like, I don't like what I'm seeing here. I'm starting to see a pattern. You can go ahead and stop now. So now I'll transition into the other thing I wanted to talk about. A potential way to get out of this is to add at the trade deadline, which the Tigers, even for their recent struggles, are definitely looking to do, because they have a sizable lead still, even if it's shrunk down to single digits. But anyway, I'm going to go through my Tigers trade deadline wish list with you guys and just point out a few players that I think the Tigers would be wise to target at the deadline. As far as somebody who I think might be able to help with their offensive woes as of late, This is the only position player I'm gonna highlight. It's Eugenio Suarez. I want there to be a reunion because he started his career in Detroit, and now he's become one of the best power hitters in the game this year. He's always been pretty streaky in terms of his power production, but when he's on, he's really on. Like, he hit 49 home runs for the Reds not that long ago, and he's got, what, 35 now on the season? If the Tigers have a position that might be in need of a mainstay, it's third base, and there you go, he plugs right in there. Not that the platoon of McKinstry and Colt Keith and others hasn't, served their purpose well, but I think it would be a good fit for uh, for a big bopper to be slotted in at third base for the Tigers. That's something that I think they're kind of missing with Kerry Carpenter not in the lineup, is someone who's a real power threat. Not that, obviously, Riley Green has 25 home runs. That's nothing to scoff at. And Torkelson's found his fire after, having a pretty bad year, to say the least, last year. He's been really good. Home runs are something that adjusts your lineup strategy and the pitching strategy against you pretty significantly. And if they can add somebody like Suarez, I think that would do wonders for the lineup. All right, and then I'm gonna talk about starting and relief pitching, because the old saying is that down the stretch and into a playoff run, you can never have too much pitching. The Tigers, they've had a little bit of struggle in the back end of the rotation. Flaherty hasn't looked his strongest. Mize has had a couple iffy starts. Reese Olson has been really good, and Cater Montero has been in doses as well. But yeah, they could definitely still use some rotational depth. So the guys that I've chosen to highlight that they could possibly go after, Mitch Keller from the Pirates, Herman Marquez from the Rockies, Merrill Kelly from the Diamondbacks, Sandy Alcantara from the Marlins, and Jeffrey Springs from the Athletics. And by the way, it's so weird that the Athletics are just the Athletics right now, not the Oakland Athletics, not the Sacramento Athletics, like the city that they're playing in right now in that minor league ballpark. They're just the Athletics. Out of these five guys, Sandy Alcantara is definitely the biggest name, former Cy Young winner, but he's having a very rough season for the Marlins. His ERA is in the sevens right now, I believe, but if you look at his numbers, he has been one of the most unlucky pitchers in the league. Not that he hasn't been getting hit around quite a bit, but he's better than the initial glance at his stat line would indicate. And I think Chris Fetter is one of, if not the best pitching coach in the league. He's turned the Tigers into somewhat of a pitching factory, and if you give him a former Cy Young winner to work with, to pair with Skubal, the upside is very, very high. So I would expect the Tigers to at least be inquiring about Sandy Alcantara. As far as the other guys go, the order in which I would indicate the amount that I want them, they're pretty close to each other, but I would put Jeffrey Springs at the top of the list because he's another lefty to put in the rotation, potentially giving you an advantage throughout a postseason series if the opposing manager has to keep adjusting their lineups to go with, to play against what the starting pitcher is bringing to the table. Potentially with Skubal and Springs starting in the same postseason series, that would make for a pretty off-balanced lineup once they've seen one guy or the other trying to adjust to them, as well as whoever else would pitch in the series. But my main point is two lefties in the rotation would be a very good thing to go into the postseason with. Then as far as the others, they're they're all kind of in the same vein. Medium risk in terms of how they might pan out in Detroit. Particularly Herman Marquez, who's been a career Colorado Rocky. Pitching in Coors Field is a very tall task because the ball carries so much more and the ball breaks a lot less because of the thin air in Denver. But anyway, my point is, if he goes to the Tigers, that could either be the best thing that could have happened to him or the worst, because, you know, in theory, his pitches would break more at home games, but it would also run the risk of him not quite making the adjustment right away and potentially getting knocked around. But yeah, I'm also a fan of Mitch Keller and Merrill Kelly. I just realized they both have MK initials. I didn't do that on purpose. But those are my starters that I would like to see them go after. And then relief pitching. Here's the main thing that I want to highlight about the Tigers bullpen. It's been very good the vast majority of the season, but there's been a few guys that have run into some trouble as of late, particularly Tommy Kahnle, and it made me realize something that the bullpen is lacking is somebody who has overpowering fastball. They have Will Vest, who has a very good one, a very good spin rate that helps avoid barrels. And then the next guy who has a big fastball, I guess, is Carlos Hernandez, who they picked up off waivers, I believe, from the Phillies. But the thing about him is, yeah, he has a 97, 98 mile an hour fastball, but he's pretty wild. Sometimes he just doesn't know where it's going, and that's not exactly the best thing to be concerned about a pitcher. So yeah, considering that, I would consider this guy to be the number one person that I want the Tigers to go after, Felix Bautista from the Orioles, because he's shown a couple years ago that he can be historically dominant, and he has historically dominant stuff. The dude is massive. He's a 6'7", 290-pound reliever who throws consistently in the triple digits, could even run it up to 103, and he has a wipeout slider to go with it. If he puts it together like he did a couple years ago, it could be lights out in the back end of the bullpen for the Tigers. Like, think of the three-headed monster of Tyler Holton, Will Vest, and Felix Bautista. Mwah, chef's kiss. I love it. Next reliever they could potentially target, Pete Fairbanks from the Rays. Another guy who has an overpowering fastball. Another tall guy. Lanky this guy is. The only concern I would have about picking him up is the fact that, making trades with the Rays is historically a risky thing, because they must have wizards in their scouting department or something, or psychics, because it seems like they always end up on the right side of the trade no matter what. Like, we saw this, unfortunately, when the Tigers traded Isaac Paredes to the Rays in exchange for Austin Meadows, who, it's an unfortunate situation what happened with him and his mental health struggles, but the bottom line is that he had next to no production for the Tigers once they traded for him, and Isaac Paredes turned into a legit power threat, and now he's with, who is he with? The Cubs? No, the Astros. The Cubs traded for him last year, but he ended up with the Astros, and he's still putting up real good numbers with them. Anyway, then the last guy I'm going to talk about in this trade deadline wish list scenario, this is definitely the least likely guy for them to land, but I would, just from a personal perspective, I would love to see the Tigers get him, because, he wouldn't terrorize us anymore, is Cade Smith from the Guardians. And the reason for that being, at the trade deadline especially, it almost never happens that division rivals make a trade with each other, because, they're gonna see them more often, and they're gonna, not want to give up somebody who they think has a legitimate future in front of them. I love Cade Smith's stuff. He's been one of the more effective relievers in the game very quietly over the last couple years, and I don't think the Tigers have ever had a good showing against him. He's a Tiger killer, that's for sure. So if we could steal him from Cleveland, that would very much that would put my mind at ease quite a bit. But yeah, my main takeaway here is the Tigers, they're hitting a rough patch right now, and maybe some reinforcements via trade would be the best thing that they could do right now. But, you know, there's a reason I'm not in an MLB front office, because I'm just a guy. Let's talk about some movies now. So, if you remember from the first episode of this podcast, I laid out in detail that I'm going to have not one, but two film recommendations every week to go off of. So, stick around till the end of the podcast to hear the next two that I'm going to be talking about in episode 3, because one of them you're not going to want to miss. Trust me, this is going to make for some good content, this one that I'm about to recommend in however many minutes are left in this video at the end. I'm teasing you there, but you'll understand once I get to it. Anyway, the first one that I recommended last week is Superman, my recent recommendation. But that's one other thing that I laid out in last week's episode, is that each week it's going to be a recent recommendation and another one that can be whatever I want, just so we're all clear, in case you missed it. Anyway, recent recommendation this week, Superman, directed by James Gunn. Full disclosure here, I wasn't able to see the first 10 minutes of the movie or so because I got stuck in traffic going to the theater, but because of that, I had to, ask my sources to fill in the blanks, and my sources indicated that the movie started with a sort of Star Wars style text crawl to get you up to speed on where the film is going, because it was an effort to forego the Superman origin story, if you will, because everybody knows that he's an alien who lands on a farm in Kansas and is raised as a all-American boy who fights for truth, justice, and the American way. Basically, my point is, even though I missed a decent amount of the start of the movie, I was still able to piece together what the film was going for. Oh, and by the way, this is an attempt at starting a new cinematic universe for DC Comics after the failed launch of the Snyderverse, as people like to call it. And my opinion on those movies is, wildly varying in quality, to say the least. And Zack Snyder's take on Superman, he doesn't understand the character, like, at all. And James Gunn at least does on somewhat of a basic level. But putting the pieces together, that opening crawl decision, from what I understand, within that, they tell you that Superman was involved in a military conflict off screen, and then as the movie goes along, it kind of just throws you into the action and tells you a lot about the consequences of what he did off screen, which is if true, correct me if this isn't right, correct me if my sources gave me bad intelligence. Anyway, the point is, if that's true, it's a really weird decision to go against the show don't tell rule in such a way. Like, I would have liked to see, if I could have, the concept of Superman, threatening the leader of a country over their military occupation of a much more oppressed country by their hand, which is definitely something that you can draw real world parallels to. And I think that's a little bit of the point, because I said in my introduction to this film, the Superman character has always been somewhat of a symbol of America, and not particularly subtle in that front either, because, like I said, truth, justice, and the American way is like one of the lines that people know him for. And, America's going through some stuff right now, so I think the main point of this movie was to be uplifting in some way, based on some potential real world parallels you can draw from this. And I liked it. I thought that it went along and built on its momentum, and got better with each passing second, pretty much. What I really like about it is the fact that it feels like a distinct world that was built here. Like the MCU more or less feels like just, you're projecting the our world with superheroes onto it, but this feels like it has a very unique setting. Like, obviously these are made up cities, Metropolis, Gotham, what have you. DC created its own fictional cities for its universe, but uh, the Marvel universe is just, New York, Chicago, LA, whatever. For the most part, there are a few, obviously, like Wakanda. That's a fictional place. This universe that they're starting with this movie feels very, it almost has a retro modern feel, like the newsroom in particular. When they're at the Daily Planet, they've somehow managed to subtly incorporate an old school newsroom feel with modern technology, and I really like that. And it also feels like being thrown into the action that they are in the middle of a universe where there are superheroes, and it's kind of a aspect of modern life that people have adjusted to. And I think that was a good play on James Gunn's part, because he knows that at this point, general movie-going audiences, they know what they're looking for in a superhero movie. They've been conditioned by a lot of them over the last decade and a half, foregoing the, oh my god, there's this Superman that has now showed up aspect of the story that they could have done. That's a smart decision, I think. I'd say this movie's best quality, though, is its casting. Particularly Nicholas Hoult is a perfect Lex Luthor. He gives the exact kind of performance that I would want to see out of this character. He very clearly is an egotist, and he even says it in the movie, but he brings the exact right amount of hateful energy to Superman as I would want, while still being pretty charismatic in his own right. And I'm reminded of what they did with Lex Luthor in the Batman v Superman movie, where they decided to just make him the most neurotic weirdo ever, played by Jesse Eisenberg, which, I guess if you were going to take the character in that direction, that's a decent casting choice. But the decision to do that with Lex Luthor, I don't know who came up with that idea, if it was Snyder or whoever the writer was, or the higher-ups at DC, or if when they cast Jesse Eisenberg, he just kind of took it in his own direction. But regardless, it was a bad decision. So yeah, seeing this performance from Nicholas Hoult, this conniving weasel of a performance, it was really, really nice to see. And then outside of that, for the casting, Rachel Brosnan, if I'm pronouncing that right, she was really good as Lois Lane, a very good choice. And she felt very natural in her interactions with the rest of the Daily Planet news crew, with Clark, and just generally, you just kind of accepted her as a well-established journalist with her own conflicts as to what's going on with the Superman story, or the Superman aspect of the story, I should say. Really good job on her part. And then we get to David Cronensweet, or Corin Sweat. These names are gonna kill me. I have some very mixed thoughts on his performance because appearance-wise, he is damn near perfect for the role of Superman, and he does give the Clark Kent and Superman personas their own unique quirks and, brings a slightly different energy to both of them. He gets more endearing as the movie goes on, but there were a couple moments in his performance where it just didn't quite feel natural to me, particularly the fake interview scene with Lois. I don't know how to describe it, but something about the way he was like trying to project into the scene, like it almost felt like he was just trying too hard to, force a conflict into the situation. Like, the character dynamics just didn't, there was something a little bit off in that scene. It's hard to describe just through word of mouth, but if you've seen the movie, you probably know what I mean. Another standout character to me was Mr. Terrific. I really liked the energy and the different motif that he was bringing to the story, and his powers were pretty entertaining to watch. I also really liked his comedic bits, biats. But the main takeaway I got from this movie is I more or less know what I am gonna get with a James Gunn superhero blockbuster movie at this point. Like, he makes really good blockbuster movies, but nothing that quite elevates itself above that label, if you can see what I'm saying. Like, something like Mad Max Fury Road is a legitimately fantastic film, apart from the fact that it's a big budget blockbuster. There's clearly artistic vision in there, unique to the creative voice that's behind the camera. James Gunn, maybe it was a little more refreshing when he first jumped into the Marvel scene and they basically ended up trying to copy his style when he made the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie, and now he's transitioned into basically being the showrunner of his own cinematic universe going forward with this DC universe that he's crafting. Yeah, I like what I see. I just want to see if he can pull something out that's like actually gonna shock me with how good it is, because I more or less got what I was expecting here. Some things that rubbed me the wrong way, but I'd rank this among his filmography. It's somewhere right in the middle. I'd say the closest thing he's ever made to something that transcends the blockbuster label is Guardians of the Galaxy 3, because there is some meta commentary in there that you can find about what happened when he got quote-unquote canceled for his old... There's some things you can point to that might be interpretable as a shot at Disney for going along with this narrative. But anyway, the point is, Guardians of the Galaxy 3, I really like that movie. That's definitely my favorite of his. I'm probably gonna rewatch that at some point, which, by the way, I can't say about very many Marvel movies at this point because I'm just tired of that universe. Like, I've gotten worn out after Endgame because, now it just feels directionless, and the fact that they are bringing back Robert Downey Jr. to play Doctor Doom in the next Avengers movie. I don't think there could be a more obvious move of desperation if they tried to get people to be like, hey, remember Robert Downey Jr., you like him, right? Well, we're bringing him back even though we killed him, and people cried because of it, and just please watch the next movie, please make us a box office juggernaut again, we're fiending over here. You got any more of them billion-dollar movies? Anyway, yeah, Superman, really, really like this movie. I'll probably rewatch it at some point. I'd say it's a very solid popcorn movie, and there's a little something extra to chew on with it. Yeah, it's a James Gunn movie. Like I just said, I know more or less what I'm getting with that, and I'm gonna give it a solid 7 out of 10. I'd recommend you go watch it if you haven't already. Alright, next movie. We're going from a feel-good blockbuster to something that in one way or another is gonna, remind you of the darkest side of humanity. So The Hunt, directed by Thomas Vinterberg and starring Mads Mikkelsen from 2012. I recommended this last episode. Spoiler discussion as with the last movie, so click away if you haven't watched it, if you don't want to get spoiled, because I'm going to have to talk about the conflict of this movie to really get into my thoughts on it and establish it. A basic plot synopsis here is that Mads Mikkelsen's character Lucas is a kindergarten teacher who is going through a custody battle with his son, or over his son with his ex-wife, and then through a unfortunate series of circumstances, the community ends up believing that he molested one of the children in his classroom, and as the title implies, it leads to something of a witch hunt against him by the community, and he is put through the ringer, to say the least. And it's safe to say that you can take a lot away from this movie, since it's tackling a pretty sensitive and serious subject matter to a lot of people. The potential for discourse around this movie is very wide ranging, and it can be taken in a number of ways based on your own personal biases toward a topic like this. And as somebody who prides themselves on being something of the most neutral observer that they can in all situations, I think the execution here was handled pretty much perfectly. So let's get the obvious point out of the way here. This is not indicative of the overwhelming majority of sex abuse cases, and if you even try to convince yourself that it is, I'm sorry, but you're just not living in reality. I believe this movie was made as a reflection of a study that took place in the 90s at some point, after there was a skyrocketing number of sex abuse cases at daycare centers. There, where basically the conclusion is that, you know, people by nature want to believe that kids aren't capable of exaggerating events to this degree, but since children's minds are still forming and they have very vivid imaginations, they can be coerced into giving exaggerated answers if they're given leading questions, and that's been reflected in the approach to getting testimony from children in cases like this, where all the evidence lies on the testimony of a child. Leading questions are not good for hard evidence, let's just say that. But to me, as a film, what makes the story here hit so hard is the fact that this is a relatively blameless situation that's just highly unfortunate, because, you know, you can't blame the little girl for what she does, because she's just 5 or 6 years old and she doesn't fully understand the implications of what she's doing, and she might not even have really known that she was exaggerating things to one degree or another, as the movie shows with that scene of her mom kind of trying to convince her, like, after she says, "Oh, I just said something stupid, and it didn't actually happen, he didn't do anything wrong." Her mom basically says, like, "Oh, I understand why you think that, but it happened, I believe you, and you have to, you know, not doubt yourself," essentially. Obviously, a parent who thinks that their child was molested is going to be, you know, at least I would hope so, very supportive of their child in that endeavor. It's just, my main point is, the blame can't really be placed on any one person here, because the kid is just a kid, barely more than a toddler. Obviously, Lucas didn't do anything wrong. He handled the situation that ultimately led up to her initially saying the thing that got him in a heap load of trouble. He handled that situation well, and then after it came out, given what the rest of the community believes that he did, their actions are, to one degree or another, very understandable, because obviously pedophiles are the scum of the earth. Even fucking prisoners know that. In prison, child rapists are often killed or beaten nearly to death. Oh wait, did I say child rapist? I meant child grapist, because, censoring your language in such a way really helps, put the full weight of this subject into perspective. It's definitely not a disgusting softening of language. Like, George Carlin would have a field day with that shit if he was still around. So yeah, that should indicate, for those of you who might have wondered my stance on that, like, yeah, I'm not going to censor myself in any way on this podcast, because I don't believe in that stuff, and I don't care what an algorithm does. I'm not going to let an algorithm censor what I have to say. But yeah, the other main takeaway from this is Mads Mikkelsen gives an absolutely astonishing and heart-wrenching performance in how held back his character has to be from letting out the pent-up rage that he would clearly have in a situation like this, where he's being accused of one of the worst things that a person can do, and he literally didn't do anything wrong. But anyway, the point is, like, the amount of suffering that has to be on display in such a quiet manner to pull this off so effectively, it's hard to imagine getting into that kind of headspace. Mads Mikkelsen is one of the best actors working right now, more known for playing villains, because he does have a unique, expressive face, but this more than proves that he has a very human side to his acting capabilities, and he shows it and then some. Very empathetic performance, very, very stress-inducing. And oh yeah, I also wanted to mention Thomas Bo Larsen, the second main character, if you could call him that, the guy who played his best friend. He did a really great job as well. But I wanted to mention, he does look in this movie a lot like Neil Breen, particularly in Cade the Tortured Crossing, which is hilarious to me. I almost want to imagine there being like a deep fake where Neil Breen played that character. A particular standout moment of the movie to me is something that was set up near the beginning, after Lucas walks Clara home for the first time in the movie. The two of them have a conversation in the kitchen where Thomas Bo Larsen's character says that he can tell when Lucas is lying because he does a twitch or something with his eye. And then later on in the movie, there's a scene where Mads Mikkelsen is forced to confront him or talk to him about the accusations that are being leveled against him. And Thomas Bo Larsen's character, when he's asked if he believes that he could have done this, he's looking right at his face, and he just says, "I don't know," which is a very subtle and clever writing choice to just hint at the fact that he can still be looking for that eye twitch that he said earlier when he knows that he's lying. He might be thinking, like, am I just not seeing it? Is this just something that I've put onto him as a person after having known him for so long? Is that part all in my head? or did he really not do this? And then at the best scene in the movie, by far, in my opinion, is the church scene, when they're having the Christmas service, and he goes up to the front and and just glares back at Thomas Bo Larson's character, because everybody's murmuring at the fact that he's there. Everybody hates him essentially, and he is giving him the hardest stink eye that you'll ever see, or like the what's a better way to put it? The amount of pain and anger that's on his face is striking. They just can't stop looking at each other, and Thomas Bo Larson says to his wife, like, I can see it in his eyes, which is subtly hinting at the fact that he's figured out, oh, that twitch was a real thing. He really didn't do this, and he's suffering so hard because of the public lambasting that he's going through. I've watched this movie twice now, and the first time I saw that scene, my heart was pounding out of my chest just off of the use of the choir music and the pure acting ability of Mads Mikkelsen, and just all the setup that had been laid before that point. I damn near started hyperventilating. This is a movie that you may not want to watch if you have high anxiety, but sorry for not kind of including that in my recommendation, because some people might have went into this blind, and anyway, I'll try to keep that in mind for future recommendations to, like, basically give people a stress, I don't want to say trigger warning because I hate that word, but I understand the importance of it, because not everyone can handle something like this. And then there's the ending, where some time has passed. Lucas has been let off of the charges. They've been dropped, and people have more or less moved on past the outright vitriol that they had for him in the initial release of that information, or finding out that he could have done that. Then, of course, tying back into the title of The Hunt, he's out hunting deer with his son. I think it's implied that it's the first time his son has gone out and actually hunted deer. Lucas goes down a hill, and someone fires a shot that just barely misses his head, and you don't quite see who it is that fired the shot, but there's certain people that you can definitely imply that it was. I personally think it's very heavily implied that it's Torsten who unwittingly set the whole thing in motion to begin with, which is very poetic, but it's also something of a harsh reminder that even if some of the people have forgiven him, or at least moved past the accusations, he's always gonna have to live with this hanging over his shoulder, and always wondering if someone's gonna attack him at any given moment for something that he had no control over. It leaves you with a feeling of, alright, at least things aren't as bad as they could have been in this scenario, but it's also so incredibly bleak, and it's just fantastic filmmaking. This is definitely, I had recommended this because in the last episode I laid out my top 25 movies of the 20th century, or excuse me, 21st century so far, and this was the one I included on the list that it had been the longest since I saw, and yeah, I definitely think it belongs on that list upon revisiting it. Not super high, probably hovering somewhere around the 20 mark if I were to rank all of them, but yeah, this is an absolutely fantastic film. Now I want to address what I view are this movie's most reasonable contractors, people who believe for a very good reason that this could be a film that would be used as a justification by people who just want to believe that all sex abuse claims are just false, are just witch hunts, because you know, there's a certain someone who's holding a high position of power who has famously cried witch hunt over sexual abuse allegations for a long time now, and just won the presidential election again after, actually being an adjudicated rapist now. I say adjudicated rapist because, it clarifies that he wasn't criminally charged, but he was found liable for a rape accusation and had to pay out millions of dollars for it. And yeah, it's really, really unfortunate that people like that exist, that will just naturally want to believe that men are being taken advantage of if there's any kind of sexual abuse allegations leveled against them, and basically just say, "Oh, you're an attention whore. You just want money, and it's sickening," and all this. And obviously that's, I feel so in the same way that I would feel bad for someone who's got false accusations leveled against them. I feel that and then some for victims who might go through a terrible situation of basically just saying that your trauma, being publicly lambasted for the worst thing that can happen to a person, or close to the worst thing that can happen to a person, essentially. But my point is, that's very well intentioned, and I understand the point that is being made there, but in my view, there's a certain level of neutrality that has to be approached with this kind of subject matter, like the "Believe Women" line that came about with the Me Too movement. Again, very well intentioned, and I understand the message that you're trying to send, but at the same time, what that ultimately ends up doing is actually infantilizing women, in my opinion, by saying that they're not possible, or they're not capable of lying about something like this, because there are cases where this has happened. And a perfect example of this, and why I try to remain neutral as much as I can until there's like evidence laid out against somebody, is the Trevor Bauer case. For those of you who don't know, Trevor Bauer is a former MLB pitcher who had accusations leveled against him of sexual assault, and let me just say up front, he's a highly outspoken person, and when I say that, that's like tapping around the fact that I think he's a absolute raging douchebag. I can't fucking stand the guy, and I don't miss the fact that he's out of the MLB now and probably never coming back. Like, he's just way too much of a circus clown for anybody to deal with. That being said, the particulars of the accusations that were leveled against him eventually came out, like, with undeniable proof that this woman fabricated the whole story. There's texts of her between her and a friend saying, like, "Yeah, this guy's a MLB pitcher, I'm going to get the bag." And then there was also hard evidence of text conversations between Bauer and herself, prove that everything that she claimed was against her will was in fact consensual. And, as much as I don't like the guy, I wouldn't wish false sexual assault allegations on my worst enemy. And it's just jumping to one extreme or the other it doesn't help anybody, and it inevitably leads to people having their lives completely destroyed or upended just because people want to believe something. Being publicly lambasted for going forward with your claims of sexual abuse is is a bad thing. And it's weird that to some people I have to say that, but it's also kind of weird that I have to say that things like the events shown in this movie do in fact happen to some people, even if that's a very, very small minority of cases, which it is. I'm of the opinion that any one falsely jailed person, when it comes to serious crimes like this, is one too many. And that's why I think innocent until proven guilty is fundamentally a good idea to base your legal system off of. Because, anyway, that was a tangent, and I've probably pissed off just about everybody that I want to piss off with that take, because if you don't understand what I'm saying there, like, you're free to leave because you're not a serious person. Anyway, back to the movie. It's handled with just the right amount of care and the right amount of observational distance that you could ask for when tackling such a subject matter, and walking the tightrope of, you don't just want to see someone suffer the entire movie in an over-the-top manner, and it could have almost turned cartoonish with some of the things that happened to him within the community. Like I said, it's handled really well, and the fact that they managed to turn this into somewhat of a blameless situation, it just reflects so well on the fact that people naturally want to jump to conclusions, even when probably justified. One more thing I wanted to say. The fact that this movie centers around a man in a child care setting, like, it reflects on, exactly, like, around small children in particular, there is this sort of hesitation in a lot of men to show affection unless it's like their kid or something, because some people look at you a certain way. Like, that's why there's so few men in early child care, is because even when they're well intentioned, they know in the back of their minds that something like this might happen. And on a broader sense, this is why a lot of men struggle to show emotions or vulnerability or even affection, because even beyond the toxic masculinity thing, where they're shown that being stoic is the correct way to be, and if you're any other way, you're gay or whatever, or you're not a real man, an inherent social pressure that's thrusted upon men to not seem quite so creepy, even if what you're doing isn't creepy at all, if it's pure projection. I give this movie a 10 out of 10. It's not for everybody, but as far as what it's trying to do, it did it damn near flawlessly, and I love it for it. Well, that sure was something, wasn't it? Time to recommend 2 more movies, and I'm gonna go with a couple of movies that aren't quite so extreme in the potential vitriol that they could elicit, but I'm gonna go with my recent recommendation. This is in theaters right now, so go watch it. I'm recommending Eddington, directed by Ari Aster, who made Hereditary, Midsummer, and Beau is Afraid. I think I've given all of his movies an 8 out of 10, and I mean, this one is controversial in its own way, not quite the same as The Hunt was, but you know, it should elicit a very interesting conversation, because from what I understand, it doesn't, like, strictly appeal to any one ideology. But anyway, go watch Eddington and report back here if you want to hear my thoughts on it. Then, this is something I'm excited about. This is my real recommendation for next week. I've had this on my watch list for a few years now. I'm going with something that, when I found out about this movie, it looked so bad, so fundamentally broken in so many ways, that would, it's almost like something that would appear to be designed in a lab specifically to be as bad of a movie to me as humanly possible, something that I might find personally highly insulting. It's that in such a way that it demands my attention, that I must watch it. It's something that I knew as soon as I figured out what it was actually about. I said, like, there's no way. I have to see this movie at some point. I have to voice my thoughts on this at some point. And the movie I'm talking about is A Mile in His Shoes. This is a baseball movie. It's on Amazon Prime if you're subscribed there. I don't really know of anywhere else that it's streaming, but if you want to watch that, and I would highly recommend coming back next week, because I have a feeling I'm gonna have a lot to say here. And it should make for some entertaining stuff if you find raging at a movie entertaining. So, yeah, that's gonna do it for episode 2 of the Simecast. Oh, I forgot to do my plugs, so I'll do that at the end here. I have the links in the description where you can follow me on Blue Sky and Letterboxd to see my social media stuff and how I log my movies. And you can subscribe too if you enjoyed what you heard and you want to see more. Give the video a thumbs up too, because that helps out big time in the algorithm, helps get more eyes on it. So, yeah, bye.